Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. Now we will have a question and answer from the first three speakers before we get into the second half of our program. Question number one, why are the powerful families like the Rothschilds so intent on promoting socialism and communism? So the way it works, unless you ask for a specific person, then it's open. You guys can just share the microphone. So why are the powerful families like the Rothschilds so intent on promoting socialism and communism?
Yeah, I mean, this it's very clear in history when you look at communism that it's definitely something where people are stripped away of their rights. A lot of it is a lot of their wealth goes centralized to the state. But the thing is, a lot of these, guys who are in office in communism, they're usually puppets to the banks. So they're not just, they're not kind of like the main bad guys. It's the corporations kind of behind them, right? So if you think like a farmer, how a farmer gathers like cows and chickens, right? It's kind of like you're the centralized bank. And all the dogs, the shepherds, are kind of like the policemen. And so you want to lure animals to eat something so you can milk them. You're taking their wealth away, right? So they're kind of like farmers. It's the easiest way to do it if you want power. If it's the opposite, if it's more, decentralized and stuff like that, they can't have as much power. I don't know if that answered exactly the question, but I'll leave it at that. Maybe someone else wants to add more to it?
Somebody else needs to say something because the next question is for Gideon.
Okay.
So let's have somebody else chime in on this. But thank you, Gideon, for your response.
The thing that comes to mind for me is I had a chance to travel to India, and there were still remnants. This was in the 1980s, and with the youth seminar on world religions that Father started, but there were still remnants of the caste system in India. And there's the Brahmin class, the upper class, and then there's the untouchables at the bottom. And the difference, the untouchables are so low in society that no one touches them. They are like animals to the upper class. And the untouchables, they do amazing, they cripple their own children so as beggars they can make more money. And you're a normal person, whoever wrote that question, because you cannot imagine the mind of somebody, a pedophile, somebody who would terrorize children, rape children, murder children, eat children. That's going on in our world. So we're, our lives are normal lives. But they worship Satan. They get power from Satan. And it's way beyond what we can grasp in our hearts, what these people do and what they're after. And they see themselves above all of us, and we're worth, we're deplorable, at least, worse than that. So, anybody else?
All righty. Gideon, this question is for you. Could you share in more detail your spiritual experience that confirmed True Father is the Messiah?
Yeah, so I'll say the greatest one that I had is I made the spiritual condition when I was 13 years old that I'm gonna love my enemy, right? Just how a True Father did when he was in Hungnam, which again was 2 years and 8 months of a gulag, where the life expectancy was 6 months for people. Father every day he just ate a fistful of rice, and actually within like the whole for 6 days he would actually split that in half and share it with his inmates, and just have the other half until Sunday, he would actually have the whole fistful of rice, showing his love for his fellow man. And as he got beaten by the guards, almost to death, he still loved them. He would talk to them, he would love them, and they didn't understand, like, what's wrong with this man? Wow. And they would actually get caught up by his love. So I try to copy that in my own life, where I had difficult enemies that didn't want to see me succeed, and I still had to love them. So as once I made that condition, when I had that spiritual experience, exactly what happened was I was in church, I saw True Father, and the announcer said, all right, everyone on the right is going to get a hug from True Father. So as True Father was just hugging everybody, finally when he came up to my family, it was just my dad, my two brothers, and me. My mom wasn't there for some reason, I don't know why. As he was about to hug my dad hugged him, but my dad, he looked like he didn't deserve to hug him. So, I don't deserve to hug you, but I'll hug you anyway. And he wanted to hug my brothers, but my brothers didn't hug him because they looked like they didn't really understand him so much. But for me, I went through hell for 5 years trying to love my enemy, but all I thought about was him. I just thought about him. I thought about all the hell that he went through and just the sacrifice that he's made, how much he loved his enemies. I just thought about him, so I ran up to him. I said, Father, I just totally embraced him. I just thought about him. As I hugged him, that's when I felt this love, this forever love. Like, my parents would die for me, but he died for me forever. Like, that's the feeling that I had. So once I felt that, I was like, whoa, what is this feeling? And then he told me, you have been through your cross, my son. And what? You've been through your cross, my son. And that because that's what it is. I'm loving my enemy, just like I'm carrying the cross like Christ. So then after that experience, I realized, I've been told, like, this is True Father, this is True Father, True Father. But now when I have that spiritual experience, I'm like, oh, now I understand why we've been calling him this. Oh my gosh, no wonder. And then actually after that, that's when I understood Jesus even more when I'm reading the Bible. And I'm making those connections. And it's like, okay, wow, this is who Jesus is. And I actually had spiritual experiences of Jesus after that. So that's greater detail of that revelation that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. The last written question is, where can I get a copy of the Divine Principle? Whoever wrote this, please see me after this is over, and I will get you set up.
I sometimes buy copies of the Divine Principle that I find on eBay or Amazon, and I have a couple, aside from my own, I have a couple of copies at home.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, we have a little time left. If you have questions that are not written down, but this is the one of two chances to ask questions. This gentleman over here.
I'm a little confused. There's a group that you folks are probably not aware of, and I'll recount some of this. There's an Anabaptist, it's called Anabaptist, that's what they were called by society at the time in Europe. They rebaptized believers. There was a breakaway of the Catholic Church, which was actually a breakaway. In reality, they were a breakaway from the Reformation group of Martin Luther and the Zwingli and Calvin also. But they were from 500 years ago in Europe, and they exemplified loving their enemies. I mean, bless those that curse you and all that, to the point they are non-resistant to a fault in this day and age. They will not even think of defending themselves. They follow Jesus' teachings to a fault. I mean, you rent one of their houses, they won't kick you out. They'll just take a beating and won't even take you to court. I have a little problem with some of that, but anyway, they strictly followed Jesus' teaching, blessing those who cursed them, loving their enemies, and judging the evil around them. The big problem was they practiced baptism when Luther, Zwingli, and Calvin wouldn't go that far because of the consequences. Practicing baptism got them genocided, got them exterminated, or they tried. As a result, they were tortured, burned alive, drowned, and slaughtered wholesale. But because of their life and the way they lived, they drew converts so fast, the movement mushroomed exponentially, even though over the course of time, millions were exterminated. This thing made the Jewish Holocaust look like peanuts.
I'm sorry, is this leading to a question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I'm just giving you a background on this. And so I shouldn't say it made the Holocaust look like like peanuts, but there is no record. But we've learned recently it was in the millions, and we're thinking it may have been many more yet. So the blood of the martyrs was the seed of the church. In that case, it was in Europe. They were well known for economic prosperity. Wherever they were, it flourished, resulting in pushback from neighbors, acquaintances, local landlords, and etc. It helped push back against the genocide. In fact, there was local landowners that said, "You come over here, and I'll protect you from persecution." And that resulted in part of their downfall. He said, "You come here, but you shut up about your faith." And anyway, some of this is recorded in a historical volume called The Martyr's Mirror. It's thousands of pages, and it records some of this starting from the time of Christ up through the 1600s. It's been reprinted in English here in this country as of the Revolutionary War.
So I don't mean to be rude, but we kind of need to get to what the question is.
Well, if you want me to be convinced, you're going to have to listen to me.
All right.
Many powerful figures in that movement, many which came to this country in the last 300 plus years, and also to Central and South America in the last 100 years. But these people were judging the evil around them. That's part of what netted them persecution. They spoke up, right, like Rev Moon did. That's what needs to happen. But they also did the unthinkable, because as soon as they were baptized, there was a price on their head. Boom. Catholic Church wanted rid of them. Martin Luther wanted rid of them. And so these people came in like that. That's some of the movement. That's the movement I come from. And I'm kind of wondering what makes Reverend Moon so outstanding that he loved his enemies, and I understand that's the way it needs to be, when this is just commonplace in the Anabaptist group of Europe and even into this country here. I mean, in the Revolutionary War and even in the Civil War, they helped both sides. They tended the wounded on both sides, and the resulting thing was it destroyed their farms and their families. The Shenandoah Valley in Virginia people still remember that stuff. It's from hundreds of years ago, and even here in Pennsylvania. But they loved their enemies to the point they helped both sides, and this got them in conflict. And it's something I think we need to think about. They would not fight, but they tended the wounded. And, you know, these are my ancestors and the people group I come from, and these are the people I want to minister to. So I have to have a valid argument. And on top of that, in this country here with the American dream, they have fallen far. There's still a godly remnant that keeps stepping out from among them to the tune of thousands. I mean, this just keeps going. But what happens is we are walking away from inheritance and money, and even just some people it's just a clothes on their back. And there's lawsuits going on. The will got changed, this, that, and the third thing. There's family farms all over Lancaster and Lebanon counties. There's fightings on because, well, the will got changed and everything else. We have to have a valid argument, because if we approach them with the same thing, they're going to say, "Oh, you guys have some of that? We don't want it."
I'd like to be the first to respond. I'm sure others, probably everyone here would like to respond to some extent or other. Really respect people who come from that tradition. And I think the willingness of people to put their lives on the line is something that comes from Jesus, and something that should be respected and needs to be respected. But I'm also reminded that Jesus himself used violence against the money changers in the temple. He advised his disciples to purchase a sword if they didn't have one, shortly before his own death, as he was sending them out. So Jesus' nonviolence, I think, is sometimes misinterpreted by some. So, for example, right now, as I mentioned earlier in the service, we are also being sued right now. And when we were sued, when a group told us to stop using a symbol that represents our theology, we drew the line and say, no, we cannot back down on this. We know that you have much deeper pockets than us. You can afford much more expensive lawyers, but we believe that this is something that comes to us from God, and so we are going to meet you. We don't want to meet you in a secular court. That's not the way that this should be handled, but that's the venue that you've chosen, and so we will meet you on that venue. And our members around the world have sacrificed a great deal to come up with the donations that have made that fight possible, and it's still going on. Now, Gideon spoke about loving your enemy. That alone, of course, does not show that Rev Moon is the Messiah, because many people, others, have done this, and in one way or another. In this case, in our suit, we believe that, and I believe that, defeating those people in court is the way to love them, because they are wrong. They are betraying the Lord. They are betraying our true Father, and so for us to defeat them and to bring them into repentance is for us to love them. Now, regarding the sword that Peter had, with Jesus' acquiescence, apparently, because Jesus told the disciples to have one, he used that sword in a foolish way. After Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, they saw that Judas was bringing the Roman soldiers. I can speak as long as he did, can't I? Okay. Bringing the Roman soldiers, and Peter pulls out the sword, and depending on which gospel, either chopped off a ear of a soldier or a servant or something like that. But anyway, imagine what would happen today if if a SWAT team came to your house, all right, and you took out a pistol or something like that, and maybe nicked the ear of one of the officers. It would be a bloodbath. It would be a bloodbath. And fortunately, Jesus acted very quickly and restored that ear. Otherwise, they would have all been killed, and there would have been nothing left right there. So Peter acted very foolishly in that sense, and Jesus said, that's when he said, you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword, which I understand to be, hey, don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. If you live just relying on your sword and nothing else, then you're going to get yourself killed. So nonviolence. I respect the people who believe in the theory of nonviolence and everything, but I think we cannot allow ourselves to go along even non-violently when God's kingdom is threatened. We need to be prepared to stand up with a weapon if necessary to protect this. And this is what Rev Moon has taught. He started ammunition, a gun business in Korea in the 1950s, early 60s. And it was what he could do within the limits of the law. And so it was an air gun. It wasn't a real gun, but that was all that the law would allow. But then later this developed until in the by the time the 1990s came along, the company that the church owned in Korea was creating what's called the Vulcan cannon. Basically, well, you know, sometimes you see sometimes it was on a fighter planes where it goes around and around and around. It's shooting out hundreds or thousands of rounds at a time. So that was a very fierce weapon, and he was very proud of that weapon, that his company was producing this weapon, and he certainly believed very much in making sure that South Korea had the ability to defend itself against incursions from the communist North, not to invade or not to attack the North, but to defend from the North. And so I believe that is my understanding of nonviolence. And I will get into more of how I think, why I think Rev Moon is the Messiah when it's my turn to speak, but that's my understanding of nonviolence.
If I could just quote from
I'm
the
sorry,
Bible.
just if somebody besides Gideon who hasn't had a chance to speak yet, anybody else? Sorry, Gideon, just, well, it looks like you're on, Gideon.
Just a quote to share that's really important. It says in John chapter 18, verse 36, when Jesus was talking to Pilate. So Pilate says, answered, am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? And Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. So that's once God's kingdom is seriously threatened when it's here, it makes sense to do anything you can to protect it. Just like Tim, I respect nonviolence. I think it's understanding strategy. So there's strategy that's involved. That's all I'll just say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gideon. Jim has something to share.
Just the thing that comes to mind for me is that there are many expectations about Christ from every different group. And at the time of Jesus, that was true. And the time now for the second coming, there are many expectations. So how can you be sure that your expectation is the correct one would be the concern. I mean, in my testimony, I said I walked in there, I didn't have any expectations, and they told me, and I said, okay, where is this guy? But those who devote their whole life to one lifestyle, expecting that that lifestyle will be fulfilled in the Messiah. And it's important to ask yourself, is that a true expectation? Because if he's not like that, if he's not an American or he's not a Jew, he's a Korean, wow, we're you're going to miss him, unfortunately, if you have a rock-solid expectation.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
If we could go back to the first question about why families like the Rothschilds that have all this money in the world, why they would dwell on promoting socialism and capitalism. I understand this young man's answer, Gideon, right, about that they look for power. And the other response was that the Indian caste system, there's still remnants of it. Both are forms of evil. So I'm wondering, what verse in the Bible would kind of sum that up? And the one that I thought of was, I believe there's a verse that says, the love of money is the root of all evil. So therefore, these families probably love their money. They have all the money in the world. So it follows, unless you fellas have a better verse, this is the one that I would hang on. So it naturally follows that you have all this money and you love it. You're going to do evil in one way or another. And one form would be promoting communism and socialism. Another form would be promoting the caste system. And we can go down the list of all the forms of evil. I think the verse that I believe is in the Bible, the love of money is the root of all. Unless you fellas have a better Better verse.
Can't worship God and mammon at the same time, brother.
It's that simple, in other words, right?
Is there someone else that wants?
Okay, was that it?
Tim wants to say something.
All right.
I'd just like to maybe comment on that. I think of someone like Bill Gates. You know, when he was working out of his father's garage, building his maybe first computer or something like that, and then things sort of snowballed far beyond probably what he expected. And one day he finds himself one of the richest people in the world. And in today's society, money gives you power because you can buy things, you can buy people, and all this stuff. And so then I think people, maybe the Rothschilds are probably this way too. All of a sudden you think, wow, I have the power to change the world. I have the power to save the world or something like that. But the problem is then that they don't connect that to Christ. They go at it at a very secular way. And I think that the Rothschilds may believe, some of them may believe that they are in a kind of a messianic position. But because they're not connecting to Christ, they are actually being used by the devil. I'm sorry, I don't have a biblical verse to back that up with, but I'd just like to add that.
Thank you, Tim. All righty. Thank you, speakers, for your input, and from members of the audience who asked questions and commented. Let's now invite our speakers to come back here and get ready we have a duo. We have Dr. and Mrs. Panzer. So first we get to hear from Richard Panzer about why he believes that Reverend Moon is the second coming of Christ.
Anyway, I don't know about you, but did you enjoy? I loved all the tests. Jim Stevens and Regis Hanna and Gideon. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah. And I just want to say, I think there are many, many people in this room right now who could give an amazing testimonies about their experience with True Father. So I look forward actually to hearing more testimonies. And then Miho and I, we were talking about, wouldn't it be great to put together a collection or a book of testimonies about True Father? Would you like to see that? Yeah. So, yeah, maybe we can, work on that. But I just want everyone to know that when Carrie asked me to give a talk today, I thought there are a lot of other people who could give better testimonies than I could. So I just want to say that. So okay, so I'm going to give a different discussion. So, and that's a wonderful thing. You'll hear very different ideas. So, okay, so let's get this rolling here. Okay, so there are many different ways to view God, right? So one way to look at God is that God is a God of power, right? And God is a God of power, right? Okay, but anyway, that's one way to look at God. And then another way to look at it is that God is a God who gives laws and who gives judgment, right? So, and that's true, right? God is the source of laws, and God is the source of also of judgment, which is actually an expression of his love for us, actually, right? And justice, desire for God of justice. And we look to God to vindicate, punish evil, and reward goodness, right? And then another way to look at God is that God is the God of prosperity, that by following God, we can be blessed. We can become prosperous and productive. And you agree, right, that God is a source of prosperity, right? Okay. And these are all things that there are many wonderful preachers out there that talk about all these issues, right? So, and then there's the God of forgiveness, right? God is the being who forgives our sin, right? You all agree with that, right? God forgives our sin. And then there's the God of salvation, right? Without God, we would be in big trouble. We agree with that, right? Yeah, we need to be saved, right? So I think there are many wonderful, great teachers if you look at the Old Testament and the New Testament, you can learn about all these aspects of God. But Reverend Moon actually came with a different understanding of God, which to me is very profound. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to read from a speech that he gave in 1977. Is that okay? Okay. Today, many people commit suicide. Do you think God's suffering at the moment of Adam and Eve's fall was greater than the despair people feel when they commit suicide? God's suffering is the only true suffering. No one but God is truly entitled to use the word suffering. We may experience some tragedy, yet as time passes, the pain and grief will be eased. However, that is not true spirituality, and the passing of time will never ease God's heart. 1,000 years is just one moment to God, who has no concept of time, and the pain of man's fall has never gone from God's mind and heart. Could God ever decide, I don't want to suffer anymore, and just cast his suffering out of his heart? Even though he's almighty, could he ever change his situation? God's love is absolute, unique, and unchanging, and it is impossible that he could alter his heart and decide not to suffer. If you lost your loved ones, you could never erase from your mind the memory of them or the pain of their departure. It is there to stay. It is the same with God. There's no way that God can remove himself from the tragedy of the fall unless the fundamental cause is eliminated. God cannot say, I don't want to be part of this suffering anymore. Christians think that Jesus came to die for their sake. Okay, well, actually, let me go back. I'm sorry. So, the amazing thing about Reverend Moon, in my opinion, is that he revealed in great depth the suffering God. And I don't see that in other religious teachers so much. Actually, if you look at the parables of Jesus, it is true that Jesus did portray God as a father who has lost his children, right? There's several parables where Jesus does talk about that. But I believe that Reverend Moon has ramped up that understanding to a 1,000-fold extent. And so, number one, what I would say about True Father is that he revealed the suffering heart of God in a way that no one else that I know of has done. It is true that there are some theologians who have been beginning to write about this topic, but someone writing a theology in a book, it's not the same as someone who's proclaiming this the way True Father has done for many, many, many decades. And to me, this is very important, actually, because our understanding of God affects the way that we relate to God, right? So if we look at God as the provider of certain benefits to us, or what can God do for me? And honestly speaking, most of us, when we first encounter Christ, usually we're in the position of, I finally realized what an idiot I am, and I need to be saved. Okay, so we're in the most immature level of the pre-baby level of needing to be saved by a parent, right? So that's where we start out, to be honest, right? But to me, because Christianity often talks in those terms about what it means to be saved, I think that we can never have a mature relationship with God. And we can never have the type of relationship that God needs us to have until we understand the suffering of God. If you never get to that level, we never can say, it's like we're always in that very immature child position of wanting to receive something from God. So the fact that Reverend Moon revealed the suffering heart of God, to me, is an amazing discovery and something to really meditate, reflect upon. So to me, that is without this understanding, the human race will always be in a kind of, even Christians will be in various levels of immaturity. And that is not to say that there aren't some great Christians who have really become one with Jesus and have not sacrificed their lives in incredibly inspirational ways. I'm not trying to criticize any. I know there's some great Christians that we should really love and admire. But to me, this is a great discovery that Reverend Moon brought to the world. And I believe it is transformational. So let me share one more part of this speech, which deals with the redefinition of the purpose of the Messiah. And if you think about it, only the Messiah really understands what the purpose for the Messiah is. We may think that we know what his purpose is. And we may read the scriptures and think, okay, this is what it is or that what it is. But I guarantee you, just as Jesus redefined what Messiah meant 2,000 years ago, and they killed him because of it, I believe the same thing actually is true now. So when Messiah comes, he's answering a different question than you're asking or than I'm asking. Christians think that Jesus came to die for their sake. How can God feel when he hears this kind of remark from man? Was the establishment of Christianity the fulfillment of God's will? Could all the Christians of the world together be in a position to comfort the sorrow of God? Not at all. If Christians want to comfort God, they must not only become like Jesus, but also go over the pinnacle of the suffering of God. Then they would be able to say, God, in me you see your only begotten Son. There is not one who is like that, and many Christians are only trying to secure a place for themselves in heaven. That is not the way that God can be comforted. Excuse me. God knew, and Jesus knew. It went down the wrong pipe. That no one else could comfort God nor surpass the mission of Jesus. That is why Jesus said that he would come again. What does that mean? It means that Jesus' job was left undone and that he must come again in order to conquer the pinnacle of suffering. Jesus held the key to the fulfillment of God's will, yet because of the faithlessness of the people, that possibility was not fulfilled. This means that mankind must go over one more hill with the Lord of the second advent. And what I think what Father is saying here is, when Christ returns, he doesn't come to save us. He comes to save God. He comes to liberate God from his suffering. That's the purpose. And in everything, when I remember Father's speeches, he always spoke in terms of making an offering to God that would liberate God. It wasn't about making us happy or making this president happy. If he met a very so-called important person, he was never impressed. I'm just being honest with you. I remember I was appointed as the local state leader of the American Freedom Coalition in New Jersey, and I remember Father said, "You should go to the governor, and you should, I forget exactly what we're supposed to do, but we're supposed to go to the governor and talk to the governor." Now, from my perspective, I said, I have no idea what I'm supposed to tell the governor, okay? I said, you need to pray more, or, I was just kind of, and in my mind, I thought this governor is elected because he has the trust of about 8 million people, and he's a very important person. I was thinking in a very horizontal way. I'm sorry to confess that. But now I understand, actually, that most of these governors, many of them are not really worth a lot of respect. But at the time, I didn't quite get it. So Anyway, let me keep on going. Until the time of Jesus, God's heart contained only suffering. But when Jesus proclaimed that he was one with God and was his only begotten Son, God felt as though he received an electric shock. Jesus' words were the most revolutionary words ever spoken. Jesus was the only person in history who was able to give God this type of shock. Jesus had the key to solving the entire fundamental human problem of the severed relationship of love between God and man. He was really the Messiah of love who could conquer the apex of God's suffering and go beyond to the realm of resurrection. If Jesus' mission could have been fulfilled on earth, then God certainly could have declared to the world, "My will is done." So, anyway, I think I already made this point, right? When the Messiah comes, he redefines what the word Messiah means, because only he knows what it means. Okay. And then finally, let me read the last
one, okay.
Okay. You can see how valuable and priceless an individual you are. Do not demean your own value. You're precious in the sight of God. No matter how miserable your way of life appears, your job is to uphold God's dignity. Those who can say, "Now I have changed completely and following the direction of God," raise your hands. Now all you have to say is, "God, trust me. Eventually my spouse and myself together will go over the hill of suffering even greater than that of Jesus, who was your begotten Son of 2,000 years ago." If your faith is greater than Jesus's, then you can approach the Mount of Calvary and be in position to be crucified. But you do not have to be crucified. You can conquer death and achieve resurrection as living sons and daughters. So this is another amazing thing about True Father is that he really transforms my view of myself, because Father looks at us and sees in us our potential to be an unfallen, original person the way God intended us to be. That is an amazing gift. You know, most of us, we just look at it ourselves and we see, you know, a lot of fallenness, right? But Father would look at people and in a different way. I'm going to read 2 more paragraphs. Have you ever prayed, "God, give me the burden of America. I will bear it alone now, and later I will bear it with my spouse. Please give me the worst and heaviest possible burden. This is my privilege." Please raise your hands if you can pledge to God that you'll never do anything to harm or sever your artistic relationship with him. When you determine in your heart and mind to give up your life for God's purpose, then the hill is no longer in front of you. Nothing is deeper or heavier responsibility than that. You will never decline with that determination, but will gain increasing confidence and achieve ever greater victories in the days to come. So, I guess to conclude, Father is allowing us to inherit the way that he relates to God. And when we accept that and accept that and make that my purpose, then we become messianic. Father called us tribal messiahs. He actually gave us the word Messiah. He said to all of us, you and I, we are messiahs. We're not the Messiah, but we are, he's used different terms, right? That's an amazing thing. And that we are transformed through the way that he looks at us. That's why I believe that he is the second coming of Christ.
Thank you so much, Richard. And now we will hear from Miho, Richard's beloved. And Miho, can you share a little bit of your background in terms of maybe you're going to, okay, wonderful. Okay, she's got it covered.
Hello, yes. Good afternoon. You must be tired. Okay, thank you for giving me a chance to speak out about the true Father. Yeah. Okay. We are all sinners in front of God. I was looking for Jesus such a young age. I was young time. Okay. When I was in middle school and high school, I was curious to know more about Christianity, but I did not have any chance to study it. In 1972, so long time ago, 72, you are not born even. When I was in college, a sister from one international One World Crusade approached me on campus and asked me, "Do you believe God? Do you want to know about the second coming of Christ?" Yes, I said yes. I started to hear the Divine Principle lectures at the local church. Same time, I was going to Catholic church too. I wanted to start my day by going to nearby a park. It was a beautiful park. And then to do exercise and then meditation. One day, a church sister took me to the holy ground to pray together. I was surprised to learn that it was the same place that I had been going to for exercise and meditation every day. I was so surprised. And before attending the 7-day workshop, I had a spiritual experience. I was in a deep sleep. Then I felt somebody is standing by me. So I wake up. And then I saw clear vision. Some big man was standing in front of me with a peaceful face, not scared, not a ghost, such a peaceful face. Then I was so surprised. I never forget, even now, the moment. Then at the 7-day workshop, leader showed me a photo of True Father. It was the same person I'd seen in my vision a few days before. The teaching made it clear that he was the returning Messiah. Means I went to 7-day workshop to receive a Divine Principle lecture and then study together. Since I decided to join the church, I went home because I was in campus to talk to my family, and all my family are opposite and negative. Then they throw my precious notebook from workshop, and then Divine Principle book, and then Bible into the fire. I grew up countryside. They have always fire, warm fireplace was on. Then I was crying alone in my room my father came to my room and said, these two books, Divine Principle and the Bible, are special. They would not burn in the fire. My father told me, it did not burn in the fire. I brought it today. It's not only talk. This book, a little bit burn, and then my father picked up this Divine Principle book in the fire. So I have my father's fingerprint here. And then Bible too, a little bit burn in the corner, but I didn't burn. Then what my father said, my father told me when he was younger, he wanted to, he had a dream to be a missionary, but he couldn't. And he told me, you can be a missionary and go to America. Until he died, he supported my decision to join the church and welcome members to his home all the time. Talk about Father. Then he gave to me his own Bible. And then my father loved Rev Moon as a returning Messiah more than me, more than everybody. So he really wanted to testify about the Father to negative parents and then to the sacrificing brothers and sisters all the time. I'm proud of him. We church members welcome True Father when he visited Japan in 1973. I could, that Sayama, Lake of Sayama. Then everybody gathered together. I was sitting so far away place, and then after he finished, and then I ran to the place he was giving a speech, and then I sit down and then pray. I could smell, really True Father's smell, spiritually holy smell. Then I prayed, let me be a bride of Christ my whole life. I prayed that time, I want to be bride of Christ. Then if I have a chance, I want to really be close to True Father and serve to him, if there is a chance. Then I wanted to learn about Korean culture because I want to know language, Father's language and culture. Then I can understand more deeply about True Father. That is a motivation to learn Korean folk ballet. I joined the Korean folk ballet when given the chance. Then I attended the Little Angel School for 6 months. That time I started learn Korean language little by little. And then just a baby stage, but still I learned that. Then the father called us to come to America, join the Washington Monument rally. We did a drum dance or puchum or three dances before Father spoke. And then later, it was 1976, September 18th. Later, I was called to serve True Parents at East Garden. That 10 years with them physically, and that was a really treasure for me. I can give a little testimony about the True Father. Okay. UTS, at the UTS, Father likes to go to fishing at the Hudson River, but often he called many UTS students or many members, and then he had a really person to person, like a talk. And then one day he said, "Do you have any question to me?" And then I had a question. "Hi." But I said, yeah, sister, like that. So I said, "Why I have a dream about you all the time? Could you explain to me?" I said, and then Father said, And then Father said, "Oh, you have antenna with my channel." So same as TV. If you have antenna, you want to see something, right? I wanted to see True Father all the time. I'm looking for always, Christ and then Jesus. So Father laughed and then, "Oh, you have same antenna." Okay, I was so happy. Yes, thank you so much. That's why. But antenna can get lost if you don't have condition. Then you don't see even same channel. You cannot see, me. See means you have to have a always shiny antenna with him. All right? Then also one more testimony. Hunjinim, our old brother Hunjinim. Hunjinim was at the UTS, and then many brothers and sisters were praying for Father in Korea. Father was giving a VOC, anti-communist, speech, and many spiritual ladies said, "True Father, don't go there because of there are many communist people surrounded, and they want to kill you. They are planning to kill you." And the Father said, "But still, I have to go." Then same time, Hunjinim had a car accident, and then Father was giving a speech in Korea, South Korea, at where? I forgot the name. Konjun. Then, see, this is why I want to try to say, True Father's life was always public. And then true children didn't have a chance to spend time with true own father. This is a sacrifice. True family had such a sacrifice, daily life. Even leader goes to, eat meal together from breakfast to dinner. But own children was in the corner of dinette and having meal without parents all the time. I saw always. So, this is the way True Father spend all love to leaders, love to you guys, to give all God's message to you guys. He put all family behind. This is the True Family's life. I was with them 10 years directly. Okay? Thank you. Then, as you know, that in 1983, Father was put on trial because of an arranged failure to pay $7,200 in taxes. The real reason was many people in government want to put him out of the country, and then through that he would stay in Korea rather than face the possibility of going to prison. When he was found guilty, he was sent to Danbury prison in July 1984. During his prison time, they had a couple of times he could allowed to visit his family for stay one day. That story. The True family and the member, brothers and sisters, would be welcome him at East Garden. After getting out of the car, Father came out. He would immediately went to change his clothes and take a shower before coming to see everyone with a big smile. I felt Father was here every day with us. He did not make any worry to us. When I went to the shower room, I was so surprised to see his T-shirt and socks had a big hole. And his underwear was yellow and then so dirty. And I couldn't stop crying. His hand had a deep scar as a farmer's hand. When I hold his hand, it was so rough, I could not move my hand. Then Father said, "Don't worry, Miho, keep going." I thought, this is the Messiah's hand. I never forget the hand, even now. He was serving to prisoner every day at the jail, 1.5 years. In Danbury, the administrator asked the true father if he wanted to use the chapel. Father said, yes, 3 o'clock would be good. And so the administrator asked, okay, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Father said, no, 3 a.m. in the morning. The administrator asked, why so early? 3 a.m.? And then Father explained to him. Father said, okay, 3 a.m. is the most closest time with God. God can visit me and then, relate with God, pray together with God. Then everybody called at the jail for true father. Father Moon. Many people follow, true father to have Sunday service or like that. He could have some meeting with members. Okay. When Richard and I visit the lake house to hear Hyunjin-nim's sermon, I felt that Jesus and the true father were there with him. One day, Second King was speaking about spiritual smell sense. Same time, I could smell true father, the smell around him. I and another sister were asked to give a massage to true father many times, but usually he slept only 3 hours a day. I often hear father's prayer during his sleep. So it means day and night, father's mind is always with God. Day and night, I could see that true father was living with God. He could understand God's suffering heart more than anybody. He gave speeches thousand times, but his speech came from his real experience with God. It's not only talk, it's not only read. That's why everybody moved, everybody loved him as a second Messiah, right? He's the most holy person in the history. He is the most holy person in the history. I could see that through my own eyes. Rev Sun Myung Moon is the second Messiah, second Messiah. We are standing on his victory with 3 kingships together. We are, isn't it? We are building God's kingdom with 3 kingships together. True father did not die. You said God is not die. God is not die. It's not dead. God is not dead. He likes to sing a song always. But true father is with us all the time and then guiding us all the time. Okay. My treasure is a relationship with Christ. My treasure is a relationship with God, relationship with Christ. Okay, usually many people look at the side. Who is doing this? The leader is doing this. You forget about Christ. But make treasure yourself, please. My treasure is relationship with Christ.
Sorry, Miho, we've got 1 minute left.
1 minute, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much, everybody. We are standing on victory of three kingships. Okay? This is a kind of holy person. While he was alive on the earth, and also now that he is in the spirit world and physical world. Okay? I just want to say relationship with God, Jesus, true parents. How? We can study Father's words, read a book, Bible, prayer condition. Yeah, we can learn many things from Second King Queen. We are so lucky to know them. Yeah, I feel always Father is working with Second King. Right? How we are lucky to be here. Thank you, Father, you call us. Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to really say thank you, and then you have more testimony about the Father. We'd like to hear your testimony someday. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miho. I think it was clear in her sharing, but she, just so you know, she was a personal assistant to Reverend Moon, to True Parents, for 10 years. She lived in East Garden with them, and every day took care of them. All righty, for our final speaker, let us welcome the one and only Tim Elder.
Thank you. Each of us prepared these presentations separately, and I find that the way that I was planning on approaching this topic was very similar to the way others did. So while I was sitting there, I quickly rewrote my presentation in my mind, because I think it'd be most valuable for me to approach this from a somewhat different angle. And that is to say, well, if he's the second coming of Christ, then he must be doing the same thing that the first coming of Christ did. That he must be doing the same thing that Jesus was trying to do. And so, why do we believe that Jesus is Christ? Now, many Christians will answer that and say, well, the empty tomb in the resurrection is why we believe that Jesus is Christ. And it's true that despite his efforts, many people could not believe that he was the Messiah until they saw or they had heard of the empty tomb. But one of the really valuable gems that the Father has given us is that tomb was not empty because Jesus' physical body had been revived, but rather because someone who respected Jesus very much chose to rebury him in a secret location. And we see that, in the Bible, we see that when Jesus came to the upper room where the disciples were gathered, he came into the room even though the door was closed, and he simply appeared there. We know that some people saw him, but after his death on the cross, other people didn't see him. We know that even the disciples, when they were walking along the road, there was this person who was next to them, and after a while they realized that it was Jesus, so they did not recognize him immediately. So I think there are very convincing passages in the Bible to show that the body of Jesus after that people saw after the crucifixion was not actually the resuscitated physical body. So if the tomb had not been empty, would that have made Jesus not the Messiah? No, that's not at all. In fact, he spent his, but especially his 3-year course, biblical scholars disagree how long, but 3-year course, trying to get people to see him as the Messiah. This is what the miracles were about, right? This is what the miracles were about, that he wanted people to see that he was the Messiah, that could testify to him as the Messiah. But in the end, he finally died alone. Of course, when he was handing out the fishes and the loaves, there were thousands of people, especially when he was handing out free food. I'm sure there were thousands, even more perhaps than the one gospel says 4,000, another gospel says 5,000, but there were thousands of people who were willing to follow him then. But then when he got into trouble with the Romans, then there was no one there, and even Peter, his chief disciple, denied him 3 times. So what was Jesus trying to do? He was trying to establish the kingdom. When he first came, and he said, well, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And the king has a whole series, our pastor has a whole series of sermons going through the parables of Jesus one at a time to show how he was trying to explain what the kingdom is, what God's kingdom is. And the kingdom of God essentially is what would have happened if Adam and Eve had not fallen. And I spoke about, a week ago, I spoke a little bit about Genesis chapters 1 and 2, about how Adam, when he was created, did not need salvation, did not need religion, did not need a church. And what Jesus was trying to do was to bring about a world in which that would be true again. Salvation only became necessary after the fall of Adam and Eve. And then the Old Testament is about the process that God went through in order to send a second Adam. But then that second Adam, Jesus, which the Bible identifies as a second Adam, was not able to complete everything that he wanted to complete in the world, not because of his own failure, but because the refusal of the people around him to accept him. So he offered himself as an innocent sacrifice on the cross so that he could at least open the way for spiritual salvation until he could come again. And so the second coming of Christ then comes to fulfill that purpose which Jesus left undone, not by his own failure, but because the people would not fulfill their human portion of responsibility. And that's what Reverend Moon has been doing. And especially he is doing this through 2 ways. One is to bring us a new expression of God's truth. And this is also what Jesus did. Jesus taught us that God is our Father. He's a loving Father. Well, Reverend Moon, when his new expression of truth, has given us a new understanding that, as already has been shown, that God is actually not a God of glory, but actually a God of suffering. And he's imprisoned in suffering because his children have been taken away from him, and because he created human beings to be the perfect objects of his love, but that object of love does not exist, and so he has been working throughout history to open the way for human beings to return to him. And he's been waiting for human beings to fulfill our portion of responsibility to return to him. And he also opened the way he is doing this by starting the blessing tradition. Father has shown that the history of humanity has been a history of a struggle or war between 2 lineages, the lineage of God and the lineage of Satan. When the archangel Lucifer engaged in a sexual relationship with Eve, and then through Eve also put Adam under his authority and power. He started his lineage. And so every human being that was born after that has been born into that lineage. Even when two saved Christians come together and have a child, that child is still born in Satan's lineage. And that can't go on. That can't be the way that God will allow this to go on for eternity. That for all eternity, that a new child born into the world will be in Satan's lineage. No. There has to be a way so that children born into this world are born into, not into Satan's lineage, but into God's lineage, so that finally Satan will not have a place to stand in this world. His lineage will be rooted out and wiped out entirely from this world. That is when God's kingdom will come on this earth. As I think Gideon read, Jesus said his kingdom was not of this world. Yeah, because this world is Satan's world. This world right now is where Satan rules. And so Jesus' kingdom is not of this world where Satan rules, but it will still be on this physical earth because the earth lasts forever. So others have evangelized and made great awakenings and caused millions of people to come to Christ. But it is only Reverend Sun Myung Moon who has started this lineage of God on this earth. This is what Jesus wanted desperately to do. And Father talks about Jesus' life as a person who knows Jesus, not through the Bible, but through direct experience with him. That Jesus asked Mary 3 times to allow him to marry, because it was his mother's responsibility to arrange this marriage. The Messiah cannot just go walking down the street and grab any woman he wants. There has to be done in a way, because always there is Satan trying to attack and attacking anything that takes place that is against the principle. But his mother, even we see in the marriage of Cana in the Bible, where she is actually preparing someone else's marriage, and they run out of wine, and so she says to Jesus, she says to the people, don't worry, my son can turn this water into wine. How disrespectful is that? To use, she knew of her son's spiritual powers, and she, we ran out of bread. Oh, don't worry. No, don't bother going to the grocery store. My son could just create bread out of this kind of thing. But Father taught that when the Messiah comes, the first thing that he wants to do is to find a woman whom he can educate and train to be the true mother of humanity. And that was Jesus' desire, to marry, to have children, and to plant God's lineage on this earth. And this is the point that Father has made. 1982. I think it was probably in 2002, probably the 20th anniversary of the Washington Times. 20th anniversary of Washington Times, and so the Washington Times gathered, they rented a large ballroom in one of the hotels in Washington, D.C., and they gathered, must have been about 1,000 people there. And I was working with the head of the Washington Times then, and it was his responsibility to prepare the manuscript for Father's speech. And the man looked at it and said, "Father, this is not going to work," because this was a political event. But Father wanted to talk about Jesus. He wanted to talk about Mary, and about he was going to talk about the life of Jesus and everything. And so he tried to convince Father to go with another speech, another manuscript. In fact, he even prepared a second manuscript for Father. So go with my speech. Go with the speech that I prepared. People will like this, but the one you have, that's not going to go over very well. But of course, well, I'll give you 3 guesses. Which one do you think he shot? And even as Father was going up to the rostrum, still this man, because it was going to be a disaster. Even as he was going to the rostrum, tried to get Father to, don't take that speech. Here, take this one. Well, it was a disaster. He cleared the room. By the time that speech was finished, the staff were the only people left in the room. He offended the Jews by talking about Jesus. He offended the Catholics by talking about Mary in a way that Catholics are not accustomed to hearing about Mary. And with a whole, even people who were not religious were offended because he was bringing religion into a political event. But this is what he had to say. This is what he needed to declare at that moment. And regardless of whether people were willing to hear it or not, this is what he needed to say. But part of that speech was this point that Jesus wanted to marry. In fact, Jesus wanted a wife, and through whom he could have children and to have a lineage, on the earth. And Rev Moon has accomplished that. He has accomplished that. And he inherited his foundation to one of those children, our pastor, and so reporters ask me, well, if you say his father was Christ, and the son is his inheritor and successor, I guess you mean that he's Christ also, right? Of course, they don't understand theology. Of course not. Our father is the eternal Christ. He is the eternal true parent. He and our mother, Hyun Shil Kang, are the eternal true parents. And then our pastor is not the Christ. He's not the third coming. He's not the Christ. But now, what Jesus came to accomplish on the earth has been accomplished. And that's why True Father is the second coming of Christ. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Can we have applause for all of our speakers today? We're not done yet. We have time for just question and answer. We don't have time for another break or writing anything down. So Sunmi has the microphone, and so does Misha. And if anybody has any questions, if our speakers can quickly come up to the stage like you were before, and go ahead and get in your chairs and share the microphone. And any questions from the audience?
So first, thank you, everybody. Another round of applause. How do you deal with the accusation of anthropomorphism, and how that's affected particularly the evangelicals' inability to accept Father as the Messiah? For example, Billy Graham, who converted millions of people, Jerry Falwell, who heard the principle in its entirety, and also, if you feel that we as disciples had an inherent limitation, that we missed something in this regard, in our relationship with God, relationship with Father, that disallowed these key figures to recognize true Father as a Messiah.
I think the human portion of responsibility is very, very much evident in these situations. The more significant and important a leader is, the more responsibility they have. And it's not easy for them. And this concept of the human portion of responsibility is not something that, in my limited understanding what Falwell believed and Billy Graham believed, they were more inclined to lean toward predestination. So the fact that they had a big responsibility meant that they had to step up and be very, very careful in their situation. So how do you convince somebody? Honestly speaking, I don't think we are capable of convincing other people. We can make our own sincere offering, but at the end of the day, we're not in control of what they do. That's how I would respond to that.
I like to say something about that. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think I really pay attention to Second King's life, how he relates to people, how he relates to different pastors, ministers, and just people in general. And I just feel like it's relationship. And I'm not an expert on this. I've talked to people of different faiths where they at least would get to respect, but not this huge turnaround for them to be like, oh, wait a minute, this is like coming, But man, even Jesus tried to convince people through doing things right, like multiplying bread and fish, and still people have, once it got to the point of like, oh, this is my body and this is my blood. And then people were like, oh, not anymore. He's not my Messiah. Hashtag he's not my Messiah. But yeah, and just like Regis was saying, it does come out to, their own portion of responsibility. I agree. Some people, they only search by truth. So then you show them the truth and, see what happens. Some people learn by doing things. Like if you really are, I need to see what you do. And if they see like action rather than just doing nothing, it's like people get moved by that. Which I feel like Second King, that he moves those type of people. It's like the people of action. Then it's like the people of like feelings and emotions. Like, oh, I got this feeling from this. So I feel like there's like people who have very different types of ranges of grasping, and it's something that I think us as a people need to be, varied in. We may specialize in truth. We may specialize in having deep relationships, emotional relationships. We may specialize in doing things. I think it's our responsibility to do many, many things. Just like Second King, right? He gets us to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Not everyone is a fighter type, but it's good to have that in your arsenal. So, yeah, no, that's a great question, Uncle Ted. I really appreciate it. It's definitely a journey, I feel like, for each person to find that.
Just to follow up real quick, the idea of the accusation that, well, we are giving human characteristics to God, that this poor, suffering God. And so that Reverend Moon's, Richard brought up the actual word and part of Father, but maybe for Christians who believe in a sovereign God, he's done it all. How have we failed, or have we misunderstood or not explained well enough this relationship between the God who feels and is a suffering God and our portion of responsibility?
I would, I don't know if this will answer the question, but I would say that, well, we are created in God's image. And if we have these feelings, characteristics, and natures, where did they come from? They must have come from the Creator. And I've even heard pastors say, well, don't go too far on this thing about God being Father, this kind of thing. But I think that over the 2,000 years since Jesus, Christianity has done a good job in preserving the faith until he could return, but at the same time, because so little of Jesus' words remained, I think there was a huge disadvantage for Christians. And even the Bible, of course, was only formed 300 or so years after his death, and even the words that we have in the Bible today are not necessarily based on original manuscripts, the actual original manuscript that Matthew wrote, but rather a copy of a copy of a copy or something like that, and so forth. And so there's been a great disadvantage for Christianity. There was not many of Jesus' words, and some of them were doubtful. Some people doubt whether the Sermon on the Mount was actually a sermon or whether it was just a collection of things that Jesus said over time. This kind of things are very unclear. So when Christians realize this, by studying the history of the Bible and so forth, not the actual content, but the history and the exegesis and so forth, I hope that it makes them very humble and realize that, maybe we shouldn't be so absolute in how we believe. Maybe we should be open. And of course, in Jesus' time, the Jewish establishment, Jewish religious establishment had much better actually sources for them than the Christians have today for the New Testament. So if they needed to be more open as to what the Messiah would be and to be more flexible in their understanding of what the Messiah would be, certainly that would be much more true about Christians today. So that I think that would I would address it that way.
I didn't really understand your question, Ted. If I could just add, Prophet Hosea was told by God to do what? Right. Why? So he could understand God's heart, how God's heart felt about Israel. So I think that's a clue. This might be one way to approach it.
Yeah. I think we need to understand that true Father risked the entire Unification movement, his own reputation in 1973 when Richard Nixon was being driven out of the presidency, and Father knew that if Nixon were driven out of his presidency, that millions of people would be mass murdered in Asia. And so Father, understanding the seriousness of what would happen, he called upon our church members to pray and fast in in front of the Supreme Capitol steps, and we did the Forgive, Love, and Unite campaign. And because the fake media at that time despised Richard Nixon, then when Father was defending Richard Nixon and saying he made a mistake, but forgive, love, and unite, he tried to save the presidency of Richard Nixon in order to save the lives of millions of people, okay, and the future of the world. So, unfortunately, Richard Nixon, was not able to stay in his position, even though Father met with him and told him that he had to stay in his position. So, as a consequence of that, the reputation of Reverend Moon, which up until that point had been very, very positive in many, many ways, the fake media turned all its lasers and hatred and contempt towards him, and we have the invention by the Washington Post of the term Moonie, okay? So an expression of contempt was the label for anybody who was a member of the Unification Church. And so I would argue that Reverend Moon sacrificed his own reputation and his whole ministry to try to save the free world. Okay, and that's the kind of person that he was, and we can see now, basically almost 50 years later, we can see the attack machine of the fake media and big tech, because now all Christians, we are all being put in the position, anyone who voted for Donald Trump, we are also being labeled as domestic terrorists, okay, and labeled, in very negative ways, right? Even I had people, even one of my own sons, said, why are you, he's basically saying you should be ashamed that you were there or something like that. So I put a picture of Miho and me as my Facebook page, my profile picture in front of the U.S. Capitol, right? Because the fake media, the attack machine, which is controlled by Satan, wants to destroy God's people, essentially. So we're all being forced to go through the same course, actually, that Reverend Moon went through 50 years ago. That's why people it was afraid to follow him.
I had a question for Tim Elder, actually.
Great.
You said that you changed what you were going to say, and I was curious, what were you originally planning to say? Could you share a little bit?
Do I get 20 minutes? No, I was going to, go through. I figured, okay, I will explain how I decided initially that Father was the Messiah, and that happened during my first workshop, 3-day workshop, and then I was going to go through some points of how after that this was confirmed and so on, and also I was going to talk about Father's experience in North Korea. And also about when Kim Il-sung died, and Father, when Kim Il-sung died, and this is going to get long, but when Kim Il-sung died, and when Father was in North Korea,
just 1 second. What he has to share is gold.
Really?
Yeah, we're going to start at 5:00. Anybody that wants to go, you can go, okay? But I just want to pull rank here. I would like if you could share this story with us, please.
Let me start in 1991. Actually, Father went to the Kremlin and met Gorbachev at the Kremlin because of all this, with him meeting Gorbachev in the Kremlin in 1991, and then going to Pyongyang in 1992 to meet Kim Il-sung. Some people, especially people especially the neocons, frankly, in the United States, accused him of flipping, and now, Reverend Moon, he's not actually a real anti-communist, he's actually pro-communist. But Father never talked in terms of being anti-communist. He always talked in terms of being victory over communism. And after the Berlin Wall fell, and after Eastern Europe fell, Father saw that communism had now been defeated. At least the Soviet communism had been defeated, and so he went to Moscow in 1991. And remember, in '76, you weren't born, so you don't remember. But '76, after the Washington Monument, and he said, "Okay, our next rally is going to be in Moscow. Must go, Moscow." And of course, we all sat there and in '76, it was not going to happen. But then it did happen in 1991. And he went into the Kremlin and met Gorbachev in the Kremlin. Gorbachev was still the man in charge then. And he told him there, well, you have to allow religious freedom and stuff like that. Anyway, I don't want to... Diplomatic relations with South Korea, yes. And then the next year, he said, okay, this time we're going to go to Pyongyang, and I'm going to meet Kim Il-sung. And I was, at that time, I was the foreign editor of Father's newspaper in South Korea. And so I was assigned to well, a whole bunch of us, I don't know how many, but also reporters from the Washington Times also went with him there, and we gathered in Hong Kong and then flew up to Beijing. And then the night before we were supposed to get on the plane to Beijing, Kim Il-sung sends a message and says, "Hey, if brothers are going to meet, why all these foreigners?" So I actually didn't get to go. People could go there. Kim Il-sung didn't mind if you had a U.S. passport, but he did mind if you were not ethnically Korean. And so ethnically Korean people who had U.S. passports went, but people like myself, we had to stay in Beijing while Father was in North Korea. And what happened there, Gideon referred to it just briefly. Father stood before the Supreme People's Assembly and said, "You will not unite the Korean Peninsula with Kim Il-sung's ideology, with Juche ideology, because it is centered on a human being, and if you want unity, you're going to have an ideology that is centered on God." And, well, you've probably seen photographs of the Supreme People's Assembly. There are thousands of people there. And you don't say that, you know. This is not politically correct in North Korea. And I was not there, but from what I heard, yeah, people stood up and shouted at him, "How dare you come here and say this?" And by any common sense of North Korea, Father and his entire entourage should have died that day. And that's what that would be the normal thing to happen in North Korea. Look what they did with Otto Warmbier, you know. And all he did was steal a poster. Standing in front of what must have been 1,000 people and denouncing Juche ideology? No, that just does not happen. Well, Kim Il-sung was watching this, apparently by closed-circuit television, and of course, nothing out of North Korea we can really believe 100%, but from what we hear, he said, "For the first time in my life, I've met a real Christian minister." But the point I was going to make was that Father literally put his life on the line to go and evangelize this dictator, Kim Il-sung. And so there was a meeting between the two men, and it went on for a while, and it was a quite amicable meeting, and they came to some agreements. And one of the agreements that they came to was that they would then be blood brothers. Kim Il-sung was slightly older than Father, so Father said, "Okay, you know, you are my older brother." And then he left, and then a few years later, Kim Il-sung died. And of course, for the leftists in South Korea, this was a very important event, and so they wanted to attend the funeral of Kim Il-sung in North Korea. And the South Korean government said, "Absolutely not. Anybody who goes there, we're going to put you in jail, and absolutely forbidden. No, don't go. Well, Father assigned one of his main disciples to go to the funeral. And the South Korean government was not at all pleased. And then when this disciple came out of Pyongyang, he stopped off in Beijing and had a news conference there. And the South Korean press, they actually published a photograph of this disciple bowing, in the presence of Kim Il-sung's casket, I think it was, yeah. And so, again, now this is anathema in South Korea. Any kind of, it was against the law then to even say anything good about North Korea. This was praising the enemy, basically, because North Korea is a complete enemy. And so the South Korean government said, okay, when this man returns to South Korea, we're going to arrest him. And the entire media was criticizing him and is criticizing. My father was in Alaska at the time, and he called up the head of the newspaper where I was, still foreign editor. No, I wasn't a foreign editor then, but I was on the foreign desk still. I was on the staff still, and said, "You got to fight the government on this. You have to fight the government." I sent that disciple to North Korea because I made a promise to Kim Il-sung that we were blood brothers, and of course, if I couldn't go there myself, then I had to send someone in my place. And the man who was in charge of the newspaper then said to Father, if we do this, the government is going to crush us. They may even label us an anti-state organization. And if labeled an anti-state organization, that would have meant that all assets would have been confiscated. All, of course, companies that had, any Unification Church investment in it would have been confiscated by the government. Not only that, it would mean that belonging to the Unification Church would have been a criminal offense. What in the United States would be called a what do you call it? Anyway, it would be a serious criminal offense. And so he refused to do that. He refused to follow Father's instruction. And I was there while the phone calls were going back and forth, and Father was absolutely, Joe, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. But the man said, no, if we do this, your entire foundation in South Korea will be destroyed. We can't do this because you're about to destroy your entire foundation in South Korea. Well, and so then Father said, well, I want you to come to Alaska so that I can deal with you in person. And he refused to go. Now, you might ask, well, why didn't Father just fire the guy and put someone else in there who was going to follow him? But it was this man's portion of responsibility, a human portion of responsibility. And so perhaps for that reason, Father didn't go as far as firing him. But finally, Father's will was not carried out. It was not carried out. But as Richard talked about in 1973, this was another instance where Father was prepared to put the entire Unification Church Foundation in South Korea, which was substantial, on the line, for the sake of in this case, for the sake of evangelizing North Korea, to get the North Korean government, especially Kim Jong-il, to recognize Father. Because if Father if we had been wiped out in South Korea, then maybe Father's thinking was that Kim Jong-il, the son, would have realized that Father was for real, and that he would have then some kind of relationship could have been established there, and then unification between South and North Korea could have happened at that time. That's my interpretation. But I do know that Father, once in 73 and then also in 92, did not shy away from even offering up the entire Unification Church Foundation in order to accomplish what he was certain was God's will. So I was going to talk about that. Yes.
Thank you, Tim. It is now 5 o'clock. Don't feel embarrassed if you need to leave now. However, I think Tim has to excuse himself. But our other, hold on, Richard. We have we'll take a couple, anyway, anybody can leave, but if you want to ask questions, we'll stay a little bit longer, okay?
I was just a little curious. The scripture says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word stands forever, or some variation of that. How do you see that?
Okay, are you leading up to another question?
No, that's just, Brother Tim mentioned something about the earth will stand, and I was wondering, how that relates to the scripture where it says heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will stand forever.
Oh, I see. Oh, I understand. Yeah, I don't have a comment about that. No. Yeah. My own perspective is that we've had a good 3 hours, and that I want to thank you for coming, and I am leaving right now. Okay?
Oh my.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Richard,
thank you.
I think before you go, I feel like we're over, and maybe Jim, could you close us in prayer?
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you very much. We could share these remarks and testimonies and experiences. We recognize there's so much more. We just barely touched the tip of the iceberg today. But each person is such a cosmos in themselves, so much to share. And so much is always going on with each person. And you are there totally surrounding us and wanting to teach us and guide us at all times. And we so much appreciate that we're alive at this time in history and that we can contribute in a small way to the coming of your kingdom on this earth. Again, we recommit ourselves and offer ourselves, Father, to you. Bless each person here and help them to remember things that will guide them and be helpful for you communicating with them in the future. We want to offer up this session today, Father, and I report in the name of Jim, Hiromi Stevens, and all our blessed central families. Aju.
Thank you, everybody. Have a blessed evening.